Welcome back, everybody. We're here for another exhilarating episode of Energy Bites. Here with my good buddy and co-host Bobby Nealon. How you doing, Bobby?
Doing great. How are you?
I'm doing great. Brad Dad is rad as always. And today we're here with Rodney Giles from BidOut, CEO and co-founder. Appreciate you joining us today.
Yeah, hey, thanks for coming on, guys. So
Yeah.
it's great to be on the show.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it's because I've done so many RFPs and RFQs and all of that stuff in my past that I appreciate the shit out of what you guys are doing, and it gets me excited. But let's just kind of jump into it. You know, starting briefly, you've been on some of the podcasts and stuff before, so I don't want to get too deep into your full history, but kind of walk us through. How did you get into? You've got an interesting story as far as like just randomly how you got into tech and stuff, but when did you really start getting into the kind of tech side of things, just in general, whether it's energy or not?
Tech, probably going back, I was 13, 14 years old, just fascination with computers and the internet in the mid 90s. And, but really more so trying to solve the current problems that we're trying to solve with BidOut. Probably about 3 years now. I have a co-founder of BidOut. Was a great business partner. Went to high school, really went to junior high with him as well. He really reconnected with me, had an idea, was running some oilfield service companies on the sales and ops side, and kind of explained to me the challenge that was going on. I was just in the process of exiting my second cloud venture at that time, and wanted to build a pure SaaS business, wanted to build a very niche business, most likely oil and gas. I've got some previous time spent in oil and gas back in maybe 10 years ago. And so know a little bit about it. Family's been around it. So when Tyler came kind of with the idea, we jumped into it, really started trying to figure out what the problems were. Met early on with some majors that explained that, they went out and did this bid. All the suppliers sent different formats of bid responses, different unit of measurements, different contract terms, everything. And there was no uniformity for them to truly compare these 6 or 7 suppliers.
Yeah.
She even explained to me that one of the suppliers took a screenshot of Excel, printed the screenshot out, filled it in with like a pen, took a picture of the screenshot and texted it to them and said, "This is our bid submission." And that was actually the winning bid for like a multi-million-dollar water hauling job.
It's like the least surprising thing. That's the most oil field thing I've ever heard. And it's not surprising at all.
It's not surprising. So it's for us, we wanted to build it so simple that the suppliers loved it. And we didn't want to build this complex tool that, someone like SAP or Oracle would be involved with. We wanted to make it simple. And that's what we've done. And actually making it simple is actually a lot harder than it sounds. Because it still has to be comprehensive enough to use, to have the majors use it and so forth. So that's what we've done. And we do it really well. We try to stay in the lanes of procurement and focus on other procurement challenges for our customers. And we've since kind of evolved the product into more than just bidding. But that's what we're focused on all day is procurement.
Nice. You say, you're 13, 14, whatever, you want to dive into that, like kind of what that looked, because we'd like to kind of get your evolution as a technologist even.
Sure. Well, and that's like the heyday of tech to me, right? Is the late 90s, the mid to late 90s, early 2000s, when it was just like the Wild West and every like AOL and Netscape and chat rooms and Napster. Like it was.
Oh, I remember it heavily. It's my father. He worked for probably mid his career for some smaller operators, and then went out and he was probably about 40 at the time. I was probably 7, 8, started his own small business and a small operator, and ended up growing it pretty well to probably 1,000 wells or so, and sold it off to a group. But so I was always fascinated with small businesses. I was fascinated with being an entrepreneur, being the head of a org. And so that really had started the fascination early on. 13, 14 years old, I started mowing lawns to make money. I learned very quickly, instead of me mowing the lawns, I could charge somebody like $25. I could pay somebody 10, 15 to go do it, and I could keep the rest and just kind of go be the sales guy. So started growing very, very early on that way. Probably 13, 14 years old. I remember I had a few $100 saved up. I went to CompUSA back in the day, and I was looking at some sort of video game. I don't remember which one it was, but I bought QuickBooks instead. And I was so fascinated with like making invoices and like, it was so cool. And so eventually kind of back in the days there started,
like CD-ROM probably.
I was going to say, was it on a true floppy?
It was CD-ROM, but I do remember having floppies.
Multiple floppies.
Dude, I remember having zip drives. Remember those?
Yeah.
I wanted 100
megs.
so bad because it had so much more storage.
Yeah, we had to have them. I took a computer science class in high school, and they gave us zip drives to store everything on, but I didn't have a zip drive at my house, so I couldn't do anything with it. But started hosting websites. So I started making websites for people, but realized if I could host them, I could get the recurring business. Right. And that business started growing. And by the time I graduated high school, I probably had, half a dozen employees, maybe a dozen employees working for me. And we grew that business over the next 10 years.
What time frame are we talking here?
So started the business in 2003. I was a senior in high school. I skipped school to go meet with a lawyer to incorporate. Didn't tell my parents. It was a kind of cool story. Yeah. And grew the business over the next 10 years to 150 employees, 150,000 websites. We had offices all over the world. Sold that business to an investment firm out of California. And since after that point, kind of backing up a little bit, when I got started there, I was programming all night long, PHP, MySQL, used to
LAMP stack, I guess.
LAMP stack, yeah. Absolutely. And would do all that myself, loved to program. And eventually I grew into kind of more just managing the business, but remained very, very technical along the way. Was managing, even when I sold the business, I was still managing, hundreds of servers at any time that I was, logging into daily or things like that. I was very involved on the technical side of the business.
Did y'all own the servers at Backend?
Correct. Yeah, okay. We owned all of our own servers. So
when you say like, because you said a couple times you owned cloud businesses, like you were literally, in the sense of like hosting your own servers as a service for people. I mean, that was kind of really
that's right.
ahead of its time.
We would lease data center space. We had data centers in Dallas. We had data centers in Singapore. We had data centers in London, and we owned all the servers there. We would, it was a nightmare to ship stuff to Singapore.
Sure. Yeah.
Figure out all those things. So did that and sold the business, and actually went in and bought a bunch of oil and gas production. Bought some working interest, bought some operated wells up in East Texas, and thought I would kind of do that for a little while. Played a bunch of golf and realized. I'm a lot better at the tech side than I am at oil and gas. For me, it was just, there was nothing to do. It was just kind of a waiting game.
Yeah.
Once you deployed the capital, it was multiple years until you would see a great return or commodity price would have to shift heavily.
You'd have to get a big swing to really hit
exactly.
It, yeah.
So at that point, I had an opportunity to really build a data center here in Houston, partnered with some folks, invested a little bit of money, and they had a lot more of the experience on the physical data center side than I did, but also took over a existing cloud business out of Atlanta, grew that to New Jersey and San Francisco and Dallas and ultimately Houston, and exited that about 5-6 years later to start BidOut. So, nice. And then, really, very involved from the technical side along the way, and really led the product and architecture side from BidOut from the start. We made the decision to hire developers on day one. I probably have written 5-10% of the code on BidOut, but still very involved from an architecture perspective, from a data structure perspective, but I'm not doing all the day-to-day heavy lifting. So
like, what are some, because we kind of want to share what people are doing and like what's working, and so what were some architectural kind of decisions that you made early on so that you could scale it, and like what were some things that you evaluated? And
I think looking back, we would have done things a lot different than probably where we've ended up. We had a little bit of technical debt over the last year or two we had to work ourselves out of. For us, it was let's try to build this as cheap as possible until we can get our first client. And it took a while to get our first client. So there was a number of things that I think Tyler and I, my co-founder, we kind of guessed this is how the customers would like it. Mm-hmm. We didn't truly know. Our initial pilot client that we kind of started working with right about the time that we had the minimal viable product done, they put their assets for sale and basically told us like, hey, we can't work with you guys. We're going to sell everything. And so we were kind of scrambling to go back and figure out, well, crap, who can we work with? And will like kind of believe in us early on enough to try us out.
Yeah.
And so there was a lot of changes, but, going back to your question, I think you just got to go.
Yeah.
I mean, you can plan and plan and plan forever, but if you don't ever get anything done,
sure. Yeah.
I think that's the thing that holds people back the most.
But like, was there a cloud versus on-prem, kind of decision?
It was always cloud. So that's part of the reason why I decided to exit and leave my previous cloud company is we were building like hybrid enterprise clouds in our own data centers, based on VMware, buying our own servers, buying our own storage. And although we were selling it and my goal was to evangelize that was the way to do it, I knew deep down inside that going all native cloud was really the right way to do it.
Sure.
So we went native cloud on day one.
Okay.
And, we built everything from a serverless environment. We didn't want to be dealing with, operating systems and, patches and upgrades and all that. So, we've got a full CI/CD environment set up. We can deploy code, press of a few buttons.
Yeah. Back up and explain CI/CD for people who don't know what CI/CD is.
Well, it really just allows you to do just like continuous development and, continuous deployment of features and makes the process incredibly easy.
Yeah. And testing of the code, right? Like
absolutely.
The CI part is, continuous integration, continuous deployment, right? But I mean, you can test your code before it gets deployed to certain environments and, at
scale, right? And it's really focused around kind of the agile development style, generally speaking, right? Is you're constantly moving and pivoting and stuff. And so being able to just click a button, theoretically at least.
And you've been on both sides of it. I mean, like there's that.
Yeah,
that's part of like DevOps, right? Because traditionally it was like you had developers and then operations had to deploy the code for them. But now with like these tools, like to your point, like, you don't necessarily need the IT ops on the other side.
No, that's right. I mean, we, once you get it set up right, I mean, it really developers just take over at that point.
Yeah.
And so I do a lot of the DevOps stuff and I've got everything really set up from the security perspective there. And it's better to keep the developers' hands out of that.
Yeah.
But, makes your life so much easier. You're not ever dealing with like, crap, why isn't VMware working? Why isn't Ubuntu working?
Yeah.
It's just works.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
So,
and if you're willing to, is that on AWS, Azure, Google?
We use both AWS and GCP.
Okay.
And we kind of have like front end on one, we fail over to the other, back end on another, fail over to the other.
Gotcha.
So we actually kind of utilize both for good reasons for each.
Sure.
Hybrid cloud.
Well, I mean, that's
like a cross cloud.
Yeah, cross cloud.
I call it. So, I do think that's a big risk that people have with going all in on cloud is they talk about security and all this stuff. And it's like, well, if your login gets compromised, I mean, what good is having all your backups in one spot and things like that? So,
I mean, like just because it's in your closet doesn't mean it's any more secure than,
exactly.
I mean, and again, like, because what people don't realize too, there's like security of the cloud, which is, AWS or GCP's responsibility, but then like it's your responsibility in the cloud,
right.
You need to set up the proper firewall rules and, security and everything like that. So,
and that's the thing too, that, I was involved in a lot of these data centers and we would have clients come in, hospitals and some of the large cloud companies too, they would want like the bolts on their cage, like welded shut where nobody could like unscrew the bolts, like very high level security stuff. But, I also would guess that a lot of these data centers in town and so forth, if I just go get like an AT&T shirt on eBay and show up,
right in,
they'll let you right in.
Yeah.
And so it's, I think a lot of the security on some of these things is just a big dog and pony show.
Yeah.
So,
I want to dive into.
We get pegged a lot on security for BidOut. And it's like, I have to tell our clients sometimes, like, especially when dealing with their IT departments, like the whole goal of using us is to send your data out.
Right.
So, yes, security is a big thing for us. We take it very seriously, but we're also sending it to everyone.
It's literally a request for a proposal that you're sending to all of your vendors. It's got to leave. I want to unpack like the architecture side because I feel like, a lot of our guests so far have primarily been on the dev side, but the back end, you can't run a software if you don't have hardware to run it on. So I'm very curious, like what is that like coming from, your prior company where that's all you were focused on to now you're focused basically on the software, and how involved are you on the
so
the
like
hardware side of
all
it?
of my previous cloud companies, we had a very heavy software development focus internally, mostly to improve our internal operations, to automate a lot of our internal workflows. So my first company I built, most things we did were automated. So our employee count compared to revenue of peers was a lot higher, or really it was a lot lower on employee count. But it was mostly because we had a lot automated. Now the problem is when we sold those companies, we weren't valued for the software. We were still valued at like a multiple of EBITDA or things like that. So nobody ever appreciated the software that we built in the past. And so that's why I really wanted to jump in and do like a pure play SaaS business. I've had a lot of the extensive experience in building that in the past and building the product, but a lot of times the product was only used by a handful of people for good purposes.
So what kind of stuff were you developing internally for those things? Is it
Well, we were doing automated provisioning of servers where we would like pixie boot a server. We would reboot a server, and it would, the MAC address would get deployed to a configuration file and load an operating system remotely without everybody touching it and so forth. And so a lot of things before, a lot of softwares that were doing that, 15 years ago, we were doing that kind of manually and built those processes ourselves and kind of engineered the whole thing. I've been able to do, a lot of things like that.
Almost like your own CI/CD pipeline, but just for your infrastructure
exactly
to an extent.
So,
I guess infrastructure is code in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
but you've got to be a good person to talk about containers and virtual machines and Kubernetes. I have to.
Yeah, so I know a lot about virtual machines. I know a lot about VMware. I know a lot about not that well versed Kubernetes, and really never got into it.
I mean, it's still very new.
Yeah.
Buzzwordy.
But I mean, I guess he wouldn't necessarily need to, because when you're utilizing the serverless stuff, I mean, like
that's true.
AWS or GCP is handling that under the hood for you. I mean, there's that whole shared responsibility model. I mean, you can go all the way down and I just need an EC2 instance, or there's all those kind of intermediate steps where an RDS instance is somewhat. I mean, when you're going pretty much the full serverless with Lambdas and all that kind of stuff, like they're hosting, I mean, they probably are containerizing your code and putting it in, like scaling it. But again, that's the beautiful thing. You don't have to worry about any of that or have people on.
It makes it so much nicer to not have to worry about, like, in the past, I've upgraded MySQL, I've upgraded Postgres, the actual database server, hundreds of times, but I haven't done any of that in the last 3 or 4 years because I don't need to. And the fact that you don't have to worry about any of that has saved us immense amount of time.
And sleep.
Not only us, but from our developers would a lot of times be bottlenecked waiting on something and things like that. And now we just don't have
shut things down to patch it, or
absolutely.
It's a beautiful thing.
It's I think it really allows us to move probably twice as fast as dealing with the actual infrastructure layer.
So like what language are you using then? Like, I mean, obviously there's a handful you can probably use with serverless, but I mean probably JavaScript, .NET.
Yeah. So everything we do is kind of on a front end, back end architecture. Sure. So our backend's all Node.js. We have some cloud functions in Python for various reasons. And then we use MongoDB as our database. We were originally using a platform called Firebase DB, and that's on
GCP, right?
Yes, that's on GCP, and it allowed us to move really fast on the get go, but it had a lot of limitations with like searching database fields and doing like multi joins, and a lot of issues that we had to work our way out of. Switching to databases was super complex, and
because those are both NoSQL, right? And
correct.
They're on they're unstructured, and
So it actually. The actual migration was not hard. Kind of what happened for us is we probably spent 2 or 3 months of having a single senior backend developer focused on the data structure and going through like the initial migration. And then once we kind of had things figured out, we had to throw a whole dev team on it, like 10 guys, and basically just say, nobody can do any other feature except getting this across the finish line, because we've got to end-to-end test every single thing out there. We wanted to keep all the endpoints the same, but we couldn't for some things because like Mongo would use like _ID, where Firebase was like ID. So there was a lot of things that had to be changed, and we had to go and test a million times. And for us, our software is so time critical. Like if we can't submit a bid and the bid's ending in 45 minutes, that doesn't give them enough time to fix it. Like the bid will fail. We've got to make sure things absolutely work. And we did the migration around July 1st, and zero issues.
Nice.
And so I was very happy with our team.
Go
and
get some margaritas after that one.
it was a good thing. It was a good thing. So very nervous going into that, but I mean, we spent, by the time we finished our final kind of development side of it, when we probably tested it for 8 weeks solid with almost 10 guys testing day in and day out. So it really went off well, and since then it's allowed us to just take off from a feature development perspective, because everything's been kind of on pause for quite a while before that.
That's great.
And then on the front end side, we use Vue JS.
Yeah, Vue.js.
And we that was an early decision that was made by one of our initial developers. I didn't put any thought into that. I knew I wanted to use Mongo. I knew I wanted to use Node on the back end. Yeah. I was doing some of the back end development, some of the initial data structure. Probably, I could have gone with React. Probably would be easier to hire more developers.
Yeah, that's the thing. React. But I mean, I think Vue has a better developer experience, using it, but there's so many people using React.
Correct.
From your side, when you want to hire, you can find a lot more.
I think we get probably about a 40% smaller pool by using Vue, but I'm very happy with it. There's no reason that I would want to move away.
Yeah.
And
that's great.
So we just developed a kind of a sidebar app that we did use React on, and some of our developers know it, and they all actually came back and said, we wish we had used Vue on it.
Yeah.
So
that's
that's but these are all Vue guys as well. So
for sure. But I mean, that's generally what I've heard, because even when I was doing my web development boot camp, React was the big thing, is the big thing, but anyone who touched or did a little project with Vue was like, man, this is so much easier to use. But it's just that that momentum gets behind certain things, and it's there's just so many more people. Again, when you need to onboard someone, maybe easier to find those people to React, and cheaper because there's more supply of them. But
no, that's a big. I feel like that's kind of an overlooked thing in software development when you're architecting or whatever. It's like, oh, let's go use this thing because it's new or shiny or whatever, or it fits the bill. But then also make sure you go through and take the steps to look at, talent pools of those, right? At HiveCell, our whole thing was you can run Kubernetes at the edge. There's only 50 Kubernetes experts in the world or whatever it was at that time. And they're all making, $250,000 plus at least. And it's like, well, shit, that limits your development quite a bit, especially if you're selling to customers on the fact that they're going to be able to run it in Kubernetes, and none of them have run anything in Kubernetes before, right?
Right.
Make sure that you look at, if you're going to be choosing a software, looking at, hey, can I find developers that are actually affordable for that software?
And also, depending on what your hiring pool is it, are you willing to hire outside of, because in Houston, I'm sure if you want to hire exclusively in people local, then your Vue.js or even React.js, pool is very small. Whereas if you went more .NET, or something like that, there's a lot bigger pool of people, for those. But I think another thing to highlight there too is in the end, your clients don't give a shit whether you use React or Vue or Vanilla JS. They just want it to work. Yep. So I mean, I think as long as you're able to provide that good user experience, I mean, most of them couldn't care less what you're using on the front end.
Yeah. No, I think you're right. Yeah. So it's absolutely. But
what about? I'm curious also to pick your brain on. I'm a software startup. I'm looking at figuring out how I architect this. What would your approach be, and now having kind of both sides of the coin, both the back end and the software side, or the SaaS enterprise facing side? What would your kind of advice be to people around evaluating, do I want to, we've had people on the show already that just everything they do is executable. There's no cloud or very limited cloud, to everything's in the cloud. We don't, it's all managed by somebody else, to the Jeff Hugheses of the world who have their own servers and they maintain and manage their own, all the way to, the co-location type stuff that it seems like a lot of the big companies are starting to move to, because the cloud is also very expensive as you scale up and out, right?
Sure. So I think for us, it's really what you want to focus on. So for me, we've got to focus on sales, and sales cycle in the oil and gas space is very long. So for us, it's we had to keep our costs low. For us, we don't have, billions of records in our database. We don't have, we're growing rapidly fast. We've got several of the top 10 majors using our platform every day. However, even 5 years from now, I can't envision a server bill being hundreds of thousands a month, on the cloud.
Yeah.
So I don't think it would make sense for us to kind of repatriate that back into a data center to try to save a little bit of cost. For us, it's all about time savings.
Right.
If I want to deploy, we've got everything microserviced and, redundant across multiple regions, failing over from AWS to GCP, it's designed very well from an architecture perspective.
Yeah.
But if I were to try to replicate the same thing, buying my own servers in a data center, we would talk several $100,000 of equipment, and obviously probably a much larger
team to
monthly
manage
bill.
that part.
Then you've got to figure in time to go deal with all that crap. It's the time is the biggest part.
Yeah.
So for us, it doesn't make sense. I don't know why starting out you would want to do anything but the cloud. I think once you get to some scale and have some consistent use cases, it might make sense at that point to take some of those consistent use cases. But I don't know what's going to happen in 2 years from now.
Right.
I don't know what's going to happen next month. So, for us, I think one thing I've seen a lot of startups fail is that they'll come in with a great idea. I want to build XYZ for their whole business. I don't know anything about technology, so we're going to go find a dev shop somewhere and we're going to pay them a couple $100,000 and we're going to touch base with them once a month for the next 6-12 months. And hopefully at that point, we're going to go live and launch. And what happens is it's the drift of the product starts to shift where the founder doesn't really know what's going on. And they get to the point of finishing it and it's nowhere.
Right. It wasn't
that they wanted.
Close to what their initial vision was.
And then they'll scrap it and start over. So I think it's really important to be to follow the process along the way, to be involved. I think it's important to have a pilot kind of beta client that will work with you along the way and will be forgiving, and kind of test the product out. And I think that's super important.
Yeah.
So,
that's one of my favorite books is Crossing the Chasm. And I don't know if you've ever read it or not, but it basically walks you through kind of the whole idea of it is this is how you introduce technology products into the market. And this is what the market is comprised of, right? And it's this bell curve.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the very front of that bell curve is like the tinkerers and just the nerds like ourselves that like to mess with stuff, right? Like it doesn't matter if it works great or if it works bad. Like it's this new innovative thing and it's exciting to you because it's new and innovative, even if it is kind of, has bugs and some things. And then you've got the visionary, which is that second part of the leg, which is the kind of the individual or group of individuals that can generally understand the technology, but then they see how they can use that technology in the business in whatever form or fashion that may be, how it can help optimize, improve, reduce costs, whatever it may be. And then there's the chasm, which that's where most startups fail, which is from that point to get into the 67% of the market, the main majority of the market is a big jump, right? And so the whole book talks about all of that, and it's a great read if for anybody that hasn't read it, but it really helps just validate like all the shit that you go through when you're building software and deploying software and all of this stuff. But yeah, I completely agree with you. I don't think enough people find those early tinkerers, early adopters that are okay with, well, hey, this thing looks weird, or it's not as sexy as it could be, or there's this bug that they're the ones that report the bugs. And those are the people that you want using your stuff out of the gate, because that's how you get that feedback loop going and you continuously improve it. And ultimately that's kind of the whole idea of the book is you have enough of those and you build out a full feature product that mass majority actually would be willing to go and pay for now at that point, right?
Yeah, no, I think it's important. And I think because that's got to be cloud-based, I'm a huge proponent of it. Yeah. I don't know what really good piece of software out there or not right now. It's tough for me to think of anything that would be great without being fully cloud-based. Yeah. So
and be able to handle varying demand of clients and
absolutely. I mean, I think doing things inside of a browser is incredibly powerful. Yeah. And
the browser's getting insane. What you can do. I was
going to say it's getting more and more powerful by the day.
Absolutely. So I think by doing it that way, you can keep your costs low. You can build a powerful tool. You can don't have to worry about supporting multiple, operating systems and so forth. And, it makes it really easy.
So me coming from the data analytics side, what kind of requests are you guys getting from, say, operators to do data analytics? And are y'all looking at, employing that, within the app, or are you supporting by, do they have API access, or how are you looking at like data sharing and all that?
Yeah. So we do have some data integration done with existing clients through really private APIs that we built specifically for them. We are in the process of rolling out a full feature filled, documented API that's going to be available to everybody for really everything across the board. It allows you to, create your own data lake of all the data and so forth. We're putting a lot of efforts into trying to figure out how we can use, AI and ChatGPT and so forth to really automate a lot of these processes, ingest data. Early on, we didn't have enough data to really do it all,
test
and really try to figure out a nice data set. We didn't have a lot of data to build reports. So a lot of that's kind of forthcoming. A lot of that our team's really working on right now.
Nice.
And we've got like two types of operators that use us. We've got some that do so many bids. I mean, or they're building, so many every day that I don't think they really care about the data side of things. And then we've got some that do, very fine-tuned bids, and they are really analyzing the data. They're spending time to analyze it and understand it and look at, previous bids and so forth. And, shockingly enough, you've got some on each side that are almost the same size of operators.
Yeah.
So I don't know why some operate one way or another, but
just think, I mean, even within it, if you're able to come up with some, good models, but I guess it's gotta be, you gotta be careful with what data you can even like technically even kind of share between, but like if you're able to like identify like, is this, I guess you could say relative to historical bids from them, like this is outside of a couple standard deviations.
Contractually, we're allowed to anonymize data.
I was going to say, it seems like it would be like a bad choice from an operator to say, no, don't aggregate all the frac bids that you get in a basin and give me a report that shows that we're paying more than what the average is, right? Like that would be a value add in my opinion. Although I also could see operators
I think it's also too,
but people can reverse engineer some of that too if they know like a handful of clients.
Are always we use Workable to do all of our hiring. It's like an application tracking system. It's really great, but they've now got kind of a one button wizard to build the job descriptions. And when you type in like the title, you'll type in like inside sales rep, it'll go, I guess it goes to your website, it goes to other sources and builds like a full, 4 or 5 paragraph job description. And it takes stuff from our website. And so we're looking at how can we do that on certain bids and, kind of automatically build some of that based on historical bids and based on how people are doing things. Hopefully make that process a lot easier. But
no, I mean, that's when the first frac company I worked for in the office, once I got out of the field, that was one of the things that I was responsible for doing is maintaining our internal, it was a spreadsheet, but every time we sent out a frac bid, I would put in the basin, the operator, the sand, chemical volumes, fluid volume, like all that stuff, right? And just tracking that in a spreadsheet. Did we win it or did we lose it? Right. And you can actually come up with a pretty damn good understanding of where market prices are or stage prices are in each basin just by looking at that stuff. So I think as long as the operators can get over themselves in a little bit of sense as far as being able to share or let you aggregate that as a whole, I think there's a huge amount of value there. I'm very curious. This is just a personal pain point for me in the supply chain process is, has there been any like requests around like not only just the RFP and stuff, but then past the RFP, because this is where it gets frustrating from the services side, is, a lot of the RFP process is very like impersonal, right? And you've got all these sales guys that have relationships with the engineers, but then the supply chain person gets wedged in between them during any kind of RFP and everything has to go through them. But most of the time, those people may or may not know anything about what a frac job is or the chemicals or all that stuff. And then, so of course their job is to optimize for cost in most cases. And so, okay, yeah, great. We got the best cost, but then the service on the actual job for the next year or 6 months or whatever sucks. And so it's like, that's one of the frustrating things about supply chain in general to me is that it's hard to like weight the value of like the service, the actual service piece with the cost piece that's associated with it, because it seems like once the RFPs and stuff get done, the supply chain person moves on to the next thing that they have to bid out. They're not responsible for the actual performance of the vendor.
So when you take things like true commodities like pipe and things out of the bidding equation, when you go to actual services, we see that like 60% of the services are not awarded to the lowest cost.
Really?
And a lot of that's because they're taking into consideration past performance and reputation and so forth. And so I think it's really important. But what it also does is it also, by going through a real formalized supply chain process, we see that typical operators are saving 18% across the board. And we can back those numbers up with real data. And because what happens is when you're not consistently bidding these things out, the incumbent bidder knows they can start to creep a little bit. They can start to raise the prices up. And next thing you know, you're paying substantially more. So we had a midstream company come to us with a certain product and said that, there's no way you're going to save us money. We've got the best price out here. It's not even worth doing it. And his boss said, let's go ahead and try to bid it out. So we saved him $180,000 on his first purchase. They were buying these things every single month. And for the last, 18 months, they've almost been spending $180,000 more. And, all the suppliers know when they're bidding against other people when they have the job. Probably our most requested feature right now from several of our clients is they want engineers to not be able to see the pricing, because what happens is suppliers call the engineers and say, hey, I'm about to submit the pricing. Where are we at here?
Where do I need to be?
And,
I've had that conversation many times.
It's really just being good fiduciary, with the capital that the companies have employed you with, and really using that in the best way possible, running a fair process on it. And I think just by doing that, and we allow it to be so simplified where you can do a formalized bid in 60 seconds. You can tell your investor base that we're being prudent with the capital. It helps on the ESG side, on the governance side, to show that you're actually have controls in place.
Right.
It's the stories we hear about day in and day out are just, they're just not even believable at times. We've got a company we talked to recently that they sent out a memo to their engineers and said, we've got to start getting 3 bids on everything. So they actually found this email going to a supplier saying, hey, sorry to tell you this, we've got to start getting 3 bids. The supplier emailed the engineer back and said, don't worry, I'll set up 2 more LLCs and I'll send you all 3. And for 2 or 3 years, he was doing this.
Wow.
And,
but I mean, I love second order consequences though.
Hey, that is a hustle if I have ever seen one. And I appreciate it.
But it's also so trivial. I mean, for what, a few $100 to set up an LLC each time, it's so easy. I mean,
no, it's true. Well, this one thing I was going to say, I remember in my master's program, them very much so talking about in the supply chain side of things, it is bad or poor fiduciary responsibility not to have at least 2 to 3 vendors for every single service that you have, because you don't know what the market is if you don't, right? Like it encourages competition. Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But this should probably be vetted, for history, like
make sure they're not owned by the same company.
No, I fully agree.
But again, it's like the best laid plans. I mean,
unintended consequences are such a real thing.
Yeah.
Have you had any requests or anything from the operators? Because this is, I think, just personally, I think it'd be interesting. Of course, operators have so much data coming from so many places. It's probably pretty tricky to execute, but being able to, not only have your bids, but then being able to tie that back to the actual jobs on the back end, right? Like,
so currently we stay away from that. And from what we find out, it's just the implementation time to actually execute and all through with that ends up bogging down the whole organization. So most of the companies we deal with right now, they love that we're able to stand them up in very just a few hours. Where a lot of the software, I think one of the initial hurdles they see before we even talk to them is, well, we don't have 6 months to implement it. We don't have all this time. We're too busy. And that's what the first thing we have to let them know is that you don't need IT time. You don't need, extensive amount of resources to do a deployment. So that's I think pretty important.
Yeah.
What about working with people who like to use Excel? I mean, how have you guys worked with that?
I mean, it's not a problem. I mean, we have the ability to import and export to and from Excel, and so we've got all that already built in. And Our clients use it all the time. We've got kind of internal stats that sees how often that's being used, and it's very frequent. So it still makes it to where we standardize the process, and we've got a repository of all the data that people can search and analyze. A lot easier than trying to figure out. I mean, we've got a top 10 operator right now that we deal with. They have no repository of any of their data. That's why they moved to us. They have no approved vendor list. It's all in people's emails. They're trying to find it, and over a long period of time, it's really just kind of being pieced together. So I think that's a lot of times how some of these operators have worked in the past, and so I think we have a really simple solution to make it a lot easier for them going forward. So
and I remember where you talked to us, and it's like even just the auditability is like a huge feature in and of itself. Like
huge.
Yeah, there's so much of that, especially historically in the oil field, right? Where it's like, the guy's buying the field foreman, guns, or bringing cases of whiskey out every month, or taking them to concerts, or buying cars and all of that fun shit that you can have. I mean,
we don't stop that,
right? But having an audit trail and having the ability to see that, hey, multiple vendors did bid on this, and here's all the pricing, and here's who touched it, and who opened it, and who messed with it, and all that stuff. I really also don't want to gloss over the fact that how much I personally appreciate the fact that you'll have your own platform, but you have this direct integration into Excel, which is the tool that most of these people deal with every single day. And so you're not trying to force square peg round hole, like, hey, you've got to change your entire workflow over to this thing. No, we can integrate direct. Like that's kind of like an art to me as far as like the software dev side, is being able to get the right data to the right person and the right tool where they need it and what they're used to and comfortable with. That's really cool. What do you see? I want to know your opinions just personally on, VMs versus containers versus, we don't even have to get into Kubernetes, but just VMs and containers in general. Because being at HiveCell, again, our whole pitch was containerization, Kubernetes, and there were still so many people that I talked to, not just operators, but companies in general, that are still running VMs that might be looking at containerization, but aren't necessarily sure, or it's new, so of course it's new and intimidating, and well, it's worked this way so long, why are we gonna break it, right? You're the first person
I think it's not a one or the other. I think you really more look at like legacy applications and more like serverless, or really the next generation of applications. I think those legacy applications are going to have to continue to live on VMs until they essentially are deprecated over time. And I think in certain use cases, it makes sense where, let's say you have a SaaS environment, but you need to connect to a SCADA system or something behind the firewall. Maybe you need like a connector device or like a bridge device that can do that. And that's where a future VM would make a lot of sense. But I do think as you continue to upgrade and evolve software, I do think it's removing that whole infrastructure or virtual machine layer, removing those additional administrative burdens that come along with it is incredibly important. But it's not a rip and replace. It's going to have to be a gradual scale down, and scale down on the VM, scale down on the and really scale up in the
Well, I mean, and technically, probably most containers are being deployed on VMs. If you want, I mean, like EC2 instance is a VM. It's like it's not just one server; it's a partition.
But I still kind of look at them different. Where it's like when you're running like a true serverless environment. It's like, look at Office 365, and like there used to be like Exchange administrators that were at like these even small companies. I remember I used to maintain
SharePoint was hosted on prem, and
of course, like in 2000, when I was 2002, 2003, I remember I used to manage a veterinarian's clinic in Cyprus. They probably had 40 people there. They had their own Exchange server, and I mean it was a 30-hour a month job to administer that Exchange server. And like, all of that's been ripped and replaced now with Office 365. You've got your front desk receptionist can manage it now. It's so easy. And I think apps will continue to shift that way. I think that's the future of, I mean, just, how powerful is Salesforce? I mean, the amount of apps that have been built around that ecosystem is insane. So
I'm also curious about just the data center stuff. especially in Houston, right?
Yeah.
Like I worked for very briefly. I worked for a basin modeling, reservoir modeling software company, and one of their big unique value props was, in Petrel they were limited to how many I don't even remember if it was CPUs or GPUs back then, but they were limited to whatever it was, 8 that they could run the basin model on, right? And these basin models are fucking insane, right? Like it would take weeks to run a model on Petrel, and we had an infinite number theoretically of CPUs that they could run on, and they could run them very quickly. But I had no idea until I worked at that job that there were all these data center, like high performance compute centers in Houston.
Oh yeah.
And like there's so much compute infrastructure in Houston that people have no idea. It used to be called Cyrus One. I don't know if it's still called that or not, but that was like
it's changed to DataBank, and I mean, there's a ton in Houston. There's still a great need for data centers that on the local side, on the colo side. It's been great to me. But I think where it's really great at, it's great for the local hospitals. They're not going to, there's no point for Houston Methodist and Memorial Hermann to have their data in, a Virginia AWS region.
Yeah.
Have it here, have it with dark fiber. You can maintain the security presence that you need. And where it's also really great at, it's great for the governments, municipalities, because they're able to buy all the server equipment with bond funds as a big capital purchase.
They can depreciate it.
Well, it's the thing is, it's hard for them to spend operating income. It's hard to spend operating expenses. It's really easy for them to spend money through a bond. Right. And so for them, it's better to pay all that money up front.
Yeah.
And they don't really care about the cost. But if you have that monthly cost to the cloud, I think a lot of the employees would prefer for their infrastructure to be on the cloud.
Sure.
But it's really more the buying model. So
yeah.
I mean, there's some huge facilities here. There's one I know in West Houston here that's got I forget the name of the company, but they've got all these mineral oil cooled servers.
Oh yeah.
And it's a big hyperscaler facility there.
No, we talk about it in the office a lot. A lot of people are, at least with all the energy transition stuff, energy conservation stuff, and Chuck's been talking about it quite a bit lately. It's just like with all the AI stuff that we're currently using, and God knows what's to come, all of that requires GPUs and server infrastructure, which guess what? All requires electricity and power. And
it needs transmission too. I mean,
right. All the infrastructure around that. And so it's one of those things that's like energy demand is not going anywhere.
For sure.
Computers alone are going to continuously, scale that up and out beyond just what individual and businesses are going to anyway.
Yeah.
But it's
countries.
Right. Like it's, when you're when you hear how much it costs to run GPT every day and all of that stuff, no one thinks about like, oh yeah, there's also a shitload of power going into all of these things.
There is.
It has to come from somewhere.
Yeah, electricity comes out of the wall, and just the internet just works.
Right. Yeah, my daughter, there was like a random pop-up storm that came through Katie last night, and we got all of like 4 seconds of rain, unfortunately, but there was just a bunch of wind, and our power went out for like 30 minutes, and my daughter was just having like a legit panic attack. Like she was already doesn't like the dark, and then of course she's like, you mean there's no white noise for me to sleep with, and I can't like all this stuff, and I'm like, yeah, welcome to life before the internet. Like, just the internet alone being down was just such a culture shock to her. But it's crazy. You got anything else?
No, I don't think so.
I would ask about data, but I assume y'all's data is probably pretty general and not super nothing too crazy about it.
Yeah, there's really nothing I would say that's crazy about
not having to interpret seismic data or any of that.
No, I was talking to another co-founder recently that I forget exactly how many rows of data he was telling me they had, but I mean it was several billion. And I was like, gosh, I'm glad we don't have that problem.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my only question would be like just on the database selection side. Obviously, you went Firebase and then to Mongo, and both those are unstructured. I mean, with that to provide the flexibility early on when you didn't really know what the scheme was going to look like, or
it was really to provide the flexibility. Now going forward, we've got like very strict models around it where it's not, we don't have the ability to kind of iterate on the fly anymore.
Sure,
we do have models that kind of define the data in a sense, but that's really the initial reason was
just
not knowing
curious.
what's
I
going to
mean,
happen.
that between having to do it kind of the old-fashioned way with
We've got a new product that's forthcoming. That's a sister company of BidOut. I can't talk all about it yet, but we went through the whole process. We're still using Node. We're still using Vue, but we're using PostgreSDB on that.
Okay, nice.
So we kind of decided to give that a shot on the.
I mean, all these have started adding more kind of JSON blob support and everything too. So you can make things fit things into a rectangular box now.
Exactly.
You couldn't before, but otherwise I think we can probably jump into the speed round.
So
let's go.
Ask you some random questions about you and in general, just short, quick answers. But I'm very curious to know this one. Favorite video and board game?
Video game I don't play a lot. Probably Mario Kart with my kiddos. So I've got we got 8 and 10-year-old sons, and that's probably our Friday night.
And on what platform?
Switch.
Switch. Okay.
Switch.
Listen, I don't even know why. I think when we moved in the house, I set it up because I had my electronics box with the entertainment center, and my wife's Wii was like the OG Wii was in there. And it sat there for years. And then my daughter started getting into like Mario Kart on the iPad or something. And so I was like, oh, well, we've got Mario Kart on the Wii, And then I got down this entire rabbit hole of like, I think you can jailbreak I was going to buy games for the Wii and stuff. And I was like, I started looking, they're just as expensive as brand new games are. Like, I'm not going to spend $60 a game for my kids to play once potentially. And, but if you can find an OG Wii, jailbreaking them can literally be done from the Wii directly. Like it's crazy. And then you just plug a flash drive in, download the games, and go from there. So it's pretty fun with young kids.
I've got the old OG Nintendo back from like the mid 80s. But I'm so nervous it's like gonna catch on fire one day. It's like I've got it. I pull it out around Christmas time, but I'm like, I always tell my wife, like, do not leave it plugged in.
Right.
Yeah.
We're gonna come home and things getting old. But I always hate having to blow in the things. And board game, Monopoly. But we usually play it on the Switch. So, so that way it's mostly so my kids can't cheat.
Yes.
Because they start trying to shift rules and so forth. But that's about 2.5 hours it takes us. We do it a couple times a month. So
nice. I usually handle more of the kind of technical questions. But what's your favorite managed service?
I think S3. I mean, it's incredible. It was the first really AWS service ever.
Yeah.
And to not ever, I used to have to deal with full hard drives all the time, like on hundreds of cases. So it makes it real nice.
Yeah, that's really flexible, but just
now there's
durable.
a lot more cooler advanced services out
of course,
there.
but I mean, that's what a lot of the foundation is built on.
I think it's what accelerated a lot.
Yeah.
Of things, so
I mean, you look at even how many different, even like what Google storages or their equivalent of Blob, or whatever they call that, is
Google Cloud Buckets.
Yeah, and those are S3 compliant as well, right?
Sure.
And,
Same.
And even like I think some of there's even on-prem, solutions now that are S3 compliant, like Blob storage. So that's pretty crazy.
Yeah. Do you have just a favorite or recent person or Git repo that you found that you really like or found really useful by chance?
I've just started using GYB. It's a Google email backup service.
Okay.
Oh, nice.
That was on a Git repo, and it was kind of an interesting thing to be able to back up Gmail instances. I've got my personal email account. I've got all my emails going back from like 1998, and it's well over 1 million now.
Oh,
and
my Gmail.
I had to do a migration, and that was about the only feasible way to do it. So
no, that's pretty sweet.
But,
what's a piece of technology you're most excited about the next 5-10 years? Or next year, really. It goes so fast.
It might be a long answer, maybe not for lightning round, but everybody's been saying blockchain is going to be big, and I never really thought it was going to be big because nobody's really ever found a real use for it yet. I think AI is going to be huge, and but what I'm worried about is like AI generating like a 10-page document and then communicating back with an AI and giving us a 10-page document response. And at what point do we need something that's 10 pages long if AI is generating it and AI is going to comprehend it as well?
Right.
So that's the one thing that I'm kind of confused about, but I think it's going to catch on. So,
yeah. And then where does liability lie? With some of that stuff, like
absolutely. So I don't know.
Yeah.
So.
No, I know I've said it before, but when the first few times I used GPT and the language models, that was the first time since like Napster that I had felt that same like, holy shit, this is going to change everything kind of feeling,
Mhm.
almost 20 years later, right?
Yeah.
Like
Definite inflection point.
yeah. It's what what is one we'll wrap it up. What is one piece of advice that you would give to somebody either starting out looking to get in it to break into energy tech or transitioning into the energy tech development space that you wish you knew when you kind of started your journey?
Sales cycles are long. Find a
Yeah.
pilot to work with, and just jump in and do it.
Yeah.
I've got way too many people I know that just talk about doing something for years and years and years and never actually do it.
No.
I read the book Build by Tony Fadell very early on,
Yeah.
and his approach is get out there and get feedback quickly,
Right.
and innovate and move forward. And that's one thing that I think we've done real well. We've done plenty of things wrong, but
Sure.
that's one thing that I think we did real well. So.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah, no, the sales cycle one that
Yeah.
needs to be its own clip. If you're
But-
coming from the
Yes.
valley or whatever, it's not gonna you're
Yeah.
not gonna get full adoption. In
Yeah, it's
6
not
months.
self-service SaaS
But
for
I
some
would
people to sign
say
themselves up.
on the whole oil and gas industry, everybody's so nice. And like on the previous industries I've been in, people will just very frankly tell you, no, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
Hang up on you, whatever. Oil and gas industry, everybody's incredibly nice. And
Yeah.
they'll take a meeting. They'll obviously hear you out, and that's a great place to be.
Yeah.
For sure.
Although there are times where I felt like in my sales past, it's like I wish someone would just tell me to F off so I quit like
Yeah.
waste my time or not. Like,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
Shit or get off the pot.
no, it's very true though. Like if you're most people are willing to take a meeting and just have a conversation out of the blue, even in most
Sure.
situations. So where can people find you? How they learn more about BidOut?
I'm on LinkedIn. I'm Rodney Giles. I'm on Twitter, Rodney Giles.
Yeah.
BidOut.app is our website, and check us out there. We're all over LinkedIn too, and feel free to reach out if you have any questions. So.
Perfect.
Awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Thanks for coming
appreciate
on.
it.
Yeah.